I didn't come to Windmere Lake looking for a fight. The cabin had been in my family since 1932, hand-built by my grandfather from pine he felled himself. It was quiet, remote, and overlooked a mirror of still water that stretched into the tree line like something out of a postcard. No traffic, no schedules, just the call of loons and the soft groan of wood underfoot when you stepped out onto the dock. After 20 years working state infrastructure contracts in the capital, this place was more than a retreat. It was an exhale. But peace, as I learned quickly, is always temporary when an HOA is involved. The trouble arrived on a Sunday morning in the form of a powder blue golf cart and a woman who practically radiated confrontation. She wore a visor like a badge of authority and carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her real name was Gretchen Mallory, but I didn't know that yet. To me, she was just another neighbor with too much free time and too little sense. "Sir," she called out from the gravel path. "You can't just set up shop here without board approval." I looked up from the canoe. I was sanding. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" She stepped onto my land like she owned it, clicking across the gravel in expensive tennis shoes. "This lot falls within the Windmere Hills HOA jurisdiction. I'm the president." I wiped my hands on a rag and stood. "This cabin has been here for nearly a century. My family's owned it since before there was even a road out here. I'm not under your HOA." She gave a plastic smile. "That's not what our boundary map says. I have the original deed and a 1954 county plat map that shows your neighborhood stops a quarter-mile east of here." She didn't flinch. "We updated the map 2 years ago." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you redrew it?" Her silence confirmed as much. She turned her gaze to the old dock that jutted out into the lake like a crooked finger. "That dock doesn't meet HOA safety standards. It'll need to come down. My grandfather built that dock. Then he didn't follow code." I took a step forward, calm but firm. "Let me be clear, Ms. Mallory. Gretchen Mallory. Ms. Mallory, this land isn't governed by your HOA. I won't be removing anything. You're trespassing." She blinked, as if the word offended her. "You'll be hearing from our legal team. I look forward to it." She stormed off without another word, tires spinning a little as she peeled away in that ridiculous golf cart. I watched her disappear around the bend, then turn back to the canoe. But the calm I'd felt all morning was already gone. Over the next few weeks, the letters started arriving. First, it was a fine for unauthorized vehicle storage because my truck was parked outside the cabin. Then came notices about unapproved roof modifications, referring to a patch I'd nailed on after a thunderstorm. Eventually, she began claiming I was illegally accessing community shoreline property. Each letter came with more official-looking seals. None had any legal weight. But the intent was clear. She wanted control. I spoke to my neighbors, most of whom had no idea the HOA had extended its borders or appointed Gretchen as president. A few whispered stories, families who'd sold out and moved away after disputes over shrubs, fences, or wind chimes. She'd driven out a retired teacher over a non-regulation birdhouse. "This is how she does it," one woman said quietly. "She wears people down, makes them feel like it's not worth the hassle." But I wasn't going anywhere. One morning, a thick envelope landed in my mailbox, this one certified. It contained a cease and desist order from the HOA's Legal Advisory Committee. It accused me of unauthorized occupation, non-payment of dues, and environmental disruption of HOA-owned land. That was the final straw. I poured a cup of coffee, grabbed my documents, deed, survey maps, everything, and made a call. Not to a lawyer. To Thomas Rourke, the state attorney general. We weren't friends exactly, but we had history. Years ago, I'd pulled his daughter out of a flipped kayak during a storm on this very lake. He told me once, "You ever need anything, you call." So I did. He answered on the second ring. "Rourke. It's Alex Rains. Windmere Lake. I've got an HOA trying to annex my family's land." A pause. Then, "You free next Friday?" "I'll make the coffee." The sky was bruised with early morning mist when I saw the black SUV roll up the gravel drive. It was out of place among the pine needles and rustling lake breeze, shiny, state-issued, and humming with quiet authority. Thomas Rourke stepped out, wearing a pressed navy windbreaker and the same no-nonsense stare I remembered from news conferences. He looked around the property with sharp eyes, taking in the sagging dock, the chimney smoke curling from the cabin, and the unopened violations still tacked to the porch railing. "This the battleground?" he asked, lips curled into a half-smile. I handed him a mug of coffee. "Welcome to Windermere." He followed me inside, where I'd laid out everything: maps, deeds, tax records, and a meticulously organized binder full of every letter, threat, and fake fine Karen Mallory had ever sent me. His assistant, a younger man named Luis, carried in a portable scanner and laptop. "She's aggressive," Rourke muttered, flipping through a stack of violation notices that bordered on the absurd. "Citing you for visual disharmony?" "What does that even mean?" "It means she doesn't like my porch furniture," I replied dryly. Luis snorted from the table. "This is insane. These documents don't just push legal boundaries, they obliterate them." "Not surprising," Rourke said. "There's a growing number of HOAs abusing soft power. People think just because it's a community rule, it holds up in court. It doesn't. Not when the property is clearly exempt." He pointed to my 1932 deed, yellowed but intact, complete with the state seal and original boundary markers. "This is a brick wall, and she's been ramming into it like a wrecking ball with a clipboard." I told them about the neighbors she'd driven out, the fines she'd issued without votes, the gates she'd put up to block lake access to anyone who didn't bend the knee. Rourke took it all in, jaw tightening.
"She's not just a nuisance," he said at last.
"She's a hostile force in a position of unchecked power. That makes her a liability." Luis tapped a few keys.
"She's also sloppy."
I pulled up the HOA filings. Half of them are unsigned, some aren't even notarized. She's been operating in a gray zone, and she's gotten used to no one pushing back. "She pushed the wrong cabin," I said. Rourke nodded. "Let's make something clear. I'm not just here as a favor. I'm here because this kind of behavior spreads if we don't root it out." We spent the rest of the morning preparing a response: legal notices, injunctions, and a formal state inquiry letter to be delivered to Karen's board. Luis had already flagged the HOA's financial statements for review, and Rourke was preparing to subpoena the organization if necessary. And then, right when we were reviewing the aerial surveys of the lake border, it happened. A sudden crunch of tires. A slamming door. Then footsteps. Aggressive, unapologetic footsteps on gravel. I turned just as the cabin door burst open. Karen Mallory stood in the doorway, eyes blazing, face a shade redder than her designer tennis outfit. Behind her was a scrawny man holding a phone camera, apparently recording some kind of HOA compliance confrontation. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. "You've refused to answer our notices. That's a breach of..." She froze. Her gaze locked on Rourke, who had just stood from the table, slowly folding the state aerial map in his hands. Karen's eyes narrowed, confused but still defiant. "And who are you?" Rourke spoke calmly, his voice like polished granite. "Thomas Rourke, State Attorney General." A full beat of silence passed. Her bravado evaporated. The clipboard sagged slightly in her hand. The man with the phone wavered, unsure whether to keep filming. "I wasn't aware." "You entered private property without invitation," Rourke said, stepping forward. "While a state official is conducting an active review, that alone could constitute trespassing during an investigation." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I'm just trying to enforce the standards. We have bylaws, which do not apply to this property," he cut in. "And you know that. We have your letters, your notices, your altered boundary maps." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "You are hereby notified that the Windermere Hills HOA is under formal review by the state of Washington. Any further actions taken by you or your board will be considered obstruction." Karen took the envelope with trembling hands, her voice brittle. "This is outrageous." "No," Rourke replied, his voice low and final. "This is overdue." She turned on her heel, shaking, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her like the closing of a courtroom gavel. I let out a slow breath. Rourke sipped his coffee. She didn't expect that. I glanced out the window as her golf cart tore down the path. She has no idea what's coming next. The silence after Karen's exit was almost sacred. Luis exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath through the entire encounter. "I've seen power trips before," he muttered, "but that woman's running a full-blown regime." "She's not just drunk on authority," Rourke said, pacing the floor. "She's weaponized it. She crossed the line the moment she tried to rewrite jurisdiction." I stood by the window, watching her golf cart vanish down the road like a retreating tyrant. But I knew Karen Mallory wasn't the type to retreat for long. She was regrouping, already scheming. "She's going to double down," I said. "She can't stand being challenged." "Let her try," Rourke replied. "We've already documented enough to freeze her board's operations. But we're not done." The next 48 hours moved fast. By noon the following day, the state had served formal notice to the HOA's registered address. A digital copy was sent to every board member, and Rourke's office filed for a temporary injunction to halt any new enforcement actions by Windmere Hills. Karen, predictably, did not take it well. She launched a counteroffensive, mass emails to HOA members accusing me of inviting government overreach, claiming the cabin was an environmental threat, and calling Rourke's visit a political stunt. She even tried rallying neighbors into a protest. But something unexpected happened. No one showed up. Neighbors who once feared her started knocking on my door. Some brought their own violation notices, photos of Karen measuring fences, threatening fines for lawn ornaments, and charging fees for supposed emergency landscaping assessments. An elderly couple, the Monroes, brought records showing that Karen had forged proxy votes during board elections to keep herself in power. "She changed the meeting dates without notice," Mrs. Monroe whispered, then claimed she had unanimous support. Others spoke of bribes, of money taken for improvements that never happened, of a mysterious reserve fund with no paper trail. Rourke listened to every word. His team gathered signed statements, photographed evidence, and added new charges to an expanding case file that was starting to look more like a criminal investigation than a civil complaint. By Friday morning, Karen's facade began to crack. She called a last-minute HOA board meeting at the lakeside gazebo she'd once declared members only. Rourke and I attended, standing in the back with folded arms while a dozen residents stared her down. Karen stood at the front, trembling with rage disguised as confidence. "We are under attack," she announced, her voice louder than it needed to be. "From outsiders who don't understand our community, our values, our rules. This is nothing but a witch hunt." A voice cut her off. Mr. Yates, a retired judge, stood up from the crowd. "No, Karen," he said firmly. "This is accountability. And you brought it on yourself." There was a slow ripple of murmurs. Some residents nodded. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. And then Rourke stepped forward. "You've used your position to harass, intimidate, and steal," he said. "The state has enough evidence to bring formal charges of fraud, embezzlement, and unlawful governance. Your reign is over." Karen's face drained of color. "You can't arrest me," she whispered. "I'm not here to arrest you," Rourke replied. "But they are." Two county deputies stepped out from behind the gazebo. Karen barely had time to turn before the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The phone that once recorded her smug confrontations now filmed her stunned silence. "You won't get away with this," she hissed, eyes burning holes into me as they led her away. "You already didn't," I said quietly. After she was gone, the crowd stayed. Some cried. Some laughed. Many just stood still, shocked that the empire of fear they'd lived under had crumbled in under a week. Luis approached with a clipboard of signatures. "That's 15 households ready to file civil suits. Want to add yours?" I looked out at the lake, calm and blue under the late summer sun. "Yeah," I said. "Let's finish this the right way." 3 weeks after Karen Mallory was escorted off HOA property in handcuffs, the lake finally sounded like itself again. No more clipboard patrols. No more fake fines taped to mailboxes. No more neighbors whispering in fear of lawn inspections. Just the lap of waves against weathered wood and the low hum of cicadas soaking in the sun. The Windmere Hills HOA dissolved quietly, no ceremony, no apology. The state froze its bank accounts, audited every cent, and found nearly $140,000 in misused funds. Karen had been funneling beautification assessments into private contractors who just happened to be owned by her cousin in Spokane. The Monroes got their property line restored. Mr. Yates was voted interim chair of a new neighborhood advisory council, one with no legal power, just the kind of goodwill people used to take for granted. The fences Karen made people tear down were rebuilt. The lake access gate she installed was removed with a crowbar by unanimous consent. As for Karen, the charges stuck. 3 felonies for misdemeanors and a civil suit from 16 households, including mine. Her trial was scheduled for spring, but her reputation was already beyond repair. She tried to spin it in the media. Government overreach, rural intimidation, a man with political friends trying to silence a woman's voice. But the documents, the signatures, the video of her being arrested in full tennis whites, it all told a different story. One that couldn't be unraveled with PR spin. I sat with Rourke on my dock the morning the final judgment came down. The lake was glassy, a thin mist burning off in streaks of gold. He sipped coffee, the same old thermos he'd brought the day he arrived. A comfortable silence settled between us. "Hard to believe," he said finally. "She ran the place like a dictatorship for years." "She never thought anyone would push back," I said. "She counted on fear, not facts." He chuckled. "Well, you gave her both barrels of the law." I smiled faintly. "With a little help from the Attorney General. Let's call it even. You pulled my daughter out of a lake during a lightning storm. I owed you one." We watched a pair of ducks drift past. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It felt earned. "I heard they're naming a new committee to oversee HOA formation statewide," I said. "Requiring training, transparency, caps on power." "Yup," Rourke nodded. Karen Mallory's little kingdom became the poster child for everything wrong with unchecked authority. He stood, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "You keeping the place long-term?"
"Thinking about it," I said.
"Might renovate the loft. Add a wood stove." "Well," he said, slinging his bag over his shoulder, "if you ever get tired of the quiet, there's a job waiting for you in state land compliance. Your paperwork game is terrifying." I laughed. "I'll think about it." We shook hands, no more words needed. I watched him drive away, the gravel kicking up in little clouds behind his SUV. Then I walked back to the porch, stepped inside the cabin, and took down Karen's final letter, the one that claimed she had the right to evict me from my own family land. I burned it in the wood stove. The neighbors came around that weekend for a fish fry. Not a formal event, just coolers, fire pits, and laughter. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker. Kids splashed in the shallows. Even Louise showed up, off the clock, holding a plate piled with hush puppies and fried catfish. "I didn't realize justice tasted this good," he said with a grin. The Monroes clinked glasses with me. "To freedom," Mr. Monroe said. And I realized something important. The fight wasn't just about land. It wasn't just about rules.
It was about belonging.
Karen tried to claim power where there was none. She mistook fear for order. And when the house of cards collapsed, what remained wasn't chaos. It was community. Real community. The kind built on trust, not threats. The kind where neighbors look out for one another, instead of through binoculars. As the sun set over Windmere Lake, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose, I walked back out to the edge of the dock, barefoot, beer in hand. The water was still. The air was light. And for the first time in years, it felt like home.